Have you ever had a night that started like any other but ended up changing your life forever? Imagine this. You're at a party, surrounded by strangers, feeling completely out of place. Then, out of nowhere, 4 men walk into your life and do something so unexpected, so powerful that it leaves you breathless. This is my story, and by the end of it, you'll see why I'll never forget that night. It was a Friday evening, and I was completely drained. The week had been long, filled with deadlines, meetings, and endless to-do lists. All I wanted was to curl up on the couch, watch something mindless, and forget the world for a while. But my husband had other plans. He walked into the room with that look, the one I knew all too well. It was the look he got when he was about to surprise me with something. "We're going out tonight," he said, holding up 2 sleek black tickets. "A friend's throwing a party and it's going to be unforgettable." I hesitated. Parties weren't really my thing. The loud music, the small talk, the awkwardness of trying to fit in. It all felt overwhelming, but the excitement in his eyes was hard to ignore. "Come on," he said, his voice softening. "It'll be fun. You need this." Reluctantly, I agreed. As I got ready, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my chest. Something about the night felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, like a shadow following me. The venue was a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town. As we pulled up, I could hear the faint thump of bass and the hum of laughter spilling out into the night. The place was lit up like a star, and the energy was palpable even from the driveway. Inside, the party was in full swing. People were everywhere, laughing, dancing, clinking glasses. My husband immediately dove into the crowd, greeting friends and strangers alike with his usual charm. I, on the other hand, felt like a fish out of water. I clung to the edge of the room, sipping my drink and trying to blend into the background. But then, something caught my eye. Across the room, standing near a large window, were 4 men. They weren't like the others. There was something about them, a quiet confidence, a magnetic presence. They weren't loud or flashy, but they commanded attention without even trying. One of them glanced in my direction, and for a brief moment our eyes met. He gave me a small, knowing smile, and something inside me shifted. I didn't know it then, but that smile was the beginning of something I'd never forget. Little did I know, this night was about to change everything. I couldn't stop glancing in their direction. The 4 men stood together, talking quietly, their presence like a calm ripple in the middle of a storm. They were dressed impeccably, sharp suits, polished shoes, and an air of confidence that made them stand out without even trying. But it wasn't just their appearance that drew me in. It was the way they carried themselves, like they belonged there but weren't trying to prove it to anyone. My husband noticed my curiosity. "You see those guys over there?" he asked, nodding toward them. "They're old friends. Come on, I'll introduce you." Before I could protest, he was leading me across the room. My heart raced a little as we approached. What would I even say? I wasn't great at small talk, especially with people who seemed so intriguing. As we got closer, one of them turned and smiled warmly. "Hey, man," he said, greeting my husband with a handshake and a pat on the back. Then his eyes shifted to me. "And who's this?" "This is my wife," my husband said proudly. I extended my hand and he shook it gently, his grip firm but not overpowering. "Nice to meet you," he said, his voice calm and steady. The others introduced themselves one by one, each with the same quiet confidence. They were polite, engaging, and had a way of making me feel like I wasn't just another face in the crowd. There was no pretense, no awkwardness, just genuine warmth. As the conversation flowed, I found myself relaxing. They asked about me, what I did, what I enjoyed, what brought me to the party. It wasn't the usual surface-level chit-chat. They actually listened, their eyes focused, and their responses thoughtful. One of them, the tallest of the group, shared a story about his travels. He spoke about the people he'd met, the lessons he'd learned, and how every experience had shaped him. His words were filled with wisdom, and I found myself hanging on to every sentence. Another chimed in, talking about the importance of community and how small acts of kindness could change someone's day, or even their life. It was refreshing to hear men speak so openly about emotions and connections. Before I knew it, I was laughing, sharing my own stories, and feeling more at ease than I had in months. It was as if they had this uncanny ability to make everyone around them feel seen and valued. But then, something unexpected happened. One of them turned to me and said, "You know, you have a light about you. Don't ever let anyone dim it." His words caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond, but they stayed with me, lingering in my mind like a melody I couldn't shake. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The night was about to take a turn I never saw coming. The music shifted to a slower, soulful rhythm, filling the room with a warmth that matched the mood. I was still standing with the four men, completely engrossed in their stories, when one of them turned to me with a gentle smile. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. I hesitated, glancing at my husband, who was chatting with someone nearby. He caught my eye and nodded, his expression encouraging. Taking a deep breath, I accepted the man's hand. As we moved to the music, he spoke softly, his voice blending seamlessly with the melody. "You seem like someone who carries a lot on their shoulders," he said. His words were so perceptive, so kind, that I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't know how to respond at first, but something about the way he looked at me, like he truly cared, made me open up. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just going through the motions," I admitted, "like I'm stuck in a routine and don't know how to break free." He nodded, as if he understood completely. "Life has a way of boxing us in," he said, "but you have the power to rewrite your story. It's never too late to start over." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that resonated deep within me. As we danced, the other three men joined us, forming a small circle. They took turns sharing their own experiences, stories of struggle, resilience, and triumph. One of them spoke about losing everything and rebuilding his life from scratch. "It wasn't easy," he said, "but every setback taught me something valuable. Now, I'm grateful for the journey." Another shared how he'd learned to forgive himself for past mistakes. "We're all works in progress," he said. "The key is to keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps." Their stories were raw and real, filled with emotions that mirrored my own. I felt a sense of connection I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just a dance, it was a moment of vulnerability, of shared humanity. By the time the song ended, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my chest. These men, who had been strangers just an hour ago, had given me something priceless: hope. But the night wasn't over yet. As I stepped back, one of them looked at me and said, "Remember, you're never alone. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one conversation, to change everything." Little did I know those words would stay with me long after the party ended. As the night deepened, the party around us seemed to fade into the background. The four men and I found a quiet corner where the music was softer and the conversations more intimate. It felt like we were in our own little world, shielded from the noise and chaos of the crowd. One of the men, the one who had danced with me earlier, leaned forward, his eyes kind but intense. "Tell us," he said gently, "what's been weighing on your heart?" The question caught me off guard. I wasn't used to opening up to strangers, but something about their presence made me feel safe. I took a deep breath and began to share things I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. I talked about the pressure I felt to be perfect, the fear of failure, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in, even when I was surrounded by people. They listened without judgment, their expressions filled with empathy. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, as if they were letting my words sink in. Then one of them spoke. "You don't have to carry all of that alone," he said. "Strength isn't about holding everything together. It's about knowing when to ask for help." Another added, "And it's okay to not have all the answers. Life is messy, and that's what makes it beautiful." Their words were like a balm to my soul. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. It wasn't just their advice that moved me, it was the way they delivered it, with such sincerity and care. One of them shared a story about a time when he had hit rock bottom. "I thought I had lost everything," he said, "but it was in that darkness that I found my true strength. Sometimes you have to fall apart to come back stronger." As he spoke, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. It was as if he was speaking directly to my heart, addressing fears I hadn't even voiced. The tallest of the group leaned in and said, "You have so much potential. Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. Your story is still being written, and it's going to be amazing." By the end of the conversation, I felt like a different person. The weight I had been carrying for so long felt lighter, as if they had helped me unpack it piece by piece. As we rejoined the party, I glanced at my husband, who was watching from across the room. He smiled at me, a knowing look in his eyes. He had brought me here for a reason, and now I understood why. This night wasn't just a party, it was a turning point, a moment of clarity and connection that I would carry with me forever. The party ended, but the impact of that night stayed with me long after we left the mansion. As we drove home, I sat in silence, replaying the conversations in my mind. The words of those 4 men echoed in my heart, each one a reminder of the strength and potential I had forgotten I possessed. My husband reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "I knew tonight would be special, but I didn't expect it to be this meaningful." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself, a need for connection, for reassurance, for a reminder that I was more than the roles I played in my daily life. In the days that followed, I found myself approaching life with a renewed sense of purpose. The doubts and fears that had once held me back began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. I started taking small steps toward the things I had always wanted to do, but had been too afraid to pursue. One of the men's words kept coming back to me. "Your story is still being written." It became a mantra, a reminder that I had the power to shape my own narrative. I began to see challenges not as obstacles but as opportunities to grow. My relationship with my husband deepened too. That night had brought us closer, reminding us of the importance of supporting each other through life's ups and downs. We started having more meaningful conversations, sharing our dreams and fears in a way we hadn't in years. Months later, I found myself thinking about those 4 men often. I never got their contact information, and I didn't even know their last names. But, in a way, that made the experience even more profound. They had come into my life at just the right moment, like guardian angels in suits, and then disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom and hope. I realized that sometimes the people who change our lives the most are the ones we meet only briefly. They remind us of our worth, our strength, and the beauty of human connection. If you've ever felt lost or unsure of yourself, I hope this story reminds you that you're not alone. Sometimes all it takes is one night, one conversation, or one kind word to change everything.